The ViewSonic Omni XG2705-2K is a budget 1440p 144Hz IPS gaming monitor. Indeed, in the UK it can be found for roughly £230, while in the US it can be found for around $340. In this detailed review, you're going to be seeing if it's actually worth its price tag, and furthermore, how it compares to some of its competitors. Now, to kick things off, we're going to talk about the response time of the monitor, and indeed over here there's a few overdrive settings that you might want to select through the OSD. Now, you've got standard, advanced and super fast as your default configuration, and then through a different tab you've also got the 1 millisecond mode. Now, the latter mode over here does reduce the overall peak brightness, which I'll touch upon further down in this review, and also does give you a slight better motion clarity. However, I did find it to be a little bit dim for my eyes, and as a result I relied on the regular overdrive modes. Now here, the standard mode doesn't give you that much of a good response time, while the advanced mode has a good blend between the overall response time of the monitor and the amount of inverse ghosting that you're going to occur. Now, in the super fast mode, you will notice significant amount of overshoot. Now, this is perfectly playable, at least in my opinion, when you're playing a potato game such as CSGO. If, however, you're playing anything graphically intense, such as, let's say, even Valorant, or even, let's say, Halo Infinite or Destiny 2, you'll find that the ultra-fast mode, which therefore gives you the lowest response time of the monitor, doesn't give you a good visual experience. And as a result, you're going to have to dial down to the advanced mode, and therefore mean that you don't get the fastest response time of the monitor. Ultimately, what I'm trying to convey over here is that the monitor's response time is impressive, although it does suffer from some overshoot ghosting, which isn't the same that could be said about some of its main competitors, specifically those that have IPS panels. Now, of course, response time is only one side of the puzzle, so what about when it comes to input lag? Well, here I can safely say that the overall input lag is absolutely class leading and very likened to some of its competitors, such as from the Acer or BenQ. Now, indeed, here the monitor made me feel like I was a Kenny S, and of course I am exaggerating in terms of being a god op player, because I truly am not. And indeed, here the ViewSonic monitor made me just feel that everything I was asking from it, specifically when it comes to input, was definitely responding, and as a result meant that I was pretty much hitting every shot as long as I was actually aiming towards the enemy. So the ViewSonic monitor certainly excels when it comes to hardcore competitive gaming. Of course, do bear in mind what I mentioned about the response time settings and the amount of overshoot that you might incur. But what about when it comes to more casual gaming? Well, the monitor does not have any sort of HDR support, and frankly at this price point I wouldn't expect it. Even if it had HDR 400 certification, it's somewhat of a gimmick. But here you will be pleased to know that it's got AMD FreeSync technology built in. Now, while tested and connected over to my RTX 3080, I noted that the monitor does also run on NVIDIA G-Sync. Of course, it doesn't have an NVIDIA G-Sync module built in, so you don't get to benefit from the full VRR range. But when I was running the NVIDIA Pendulum demo, I had no problems when it came to artifacts or black screens. So indeed, over here, if you have got a compatible NVIDIA graphics card, you might be able to run NVIDIA G-Sync like I did, and therefore benefit from playing at 1440p at 144Hz while simultaneously running NVIDIA G-Sync and or AMD FreeSync. So moving swiftly on, we get onto console gaming, and here if you have an Xbox, you'll be able to run Full HD and 1440p at 120Hz. But for PlayStation gamers, because Sony does not natively support 1440p, you'll be limited to Full HD at 120Hz. But wait, it's good to know that the ViewSonic monitor does also accept a 4K signal input, and therefore gives you a simulated 4K, meaning that if you are on PlayStation, or indeed of course on Xbox, you'll be able to run this 4K resolution and therefore get a slightly bettered experience. The only thing to be mindful about, however, is due to its HDMI port limitations, it means that you're going to be limited to around 60Hz, and therefore can't benefit from 4K 120Hz, which would have potentially made this monitor a completely different breed of monitor, and of course it's not a 4K native panel anyway, but it's something I thought to point out. So with the gaming section out of the way, what about when it comes to image quality? Well, as I did mention, this is a 1440p IPS panel, and it's got a 27-inch form factor. Now, when put across my Datacolor SpiderX Elite, I noted a 99.9% sRGB gamut coverage and a 139.3% gamut volume. You can see here how it also looks looks when it comes to Adobe RGB and DCI-P3, and also how it compares to the sRGB standard. But nevertheless, when it comes to overall color accuracy, I noted an average DLT of 2.99 and a maximum of 7.86. And note, this was when it was set to this sRGB mode through the OSD, and as a result means the emulation mode that ViewSonic provides is actually quite a little bit off, which is a shame for those people who are photo editors or video graders, because this monitor will just not appeal in terms of overall image editing or indeed color accuracy. And here some of its competitors, such as from the likes of AOC, BenQ or Acer, offer a pinpoint sRGB color accuracy. Now as for its contrast ratio, I had it tested via my Calibrite CC Display Plus calibrator at 915:1, which is a little bit below par in comparison to other IPS monitors out there on the market, and of course will be no competition to other VA panels which will offer far superior contrast ratio. Now what is impressive, however, is the overall peak and minimum brightness, and here indeed I had it tested respectively at 360 nits and 37 nits. As for the 1 millisecond mode that I previously referenced, it will have it locked at 84 nits. Similarly here, when it comes to the sRGB brightness, it goes to 180 nits as soon as you select the sRGB mode through the OSD. Now to round off the image quality section, I should just mention that the overall brightness uniformity, at least on my panel, which of course will differ from panel to panel, didn't do too well in terms of its top half. As for the backlight bleed, I did notice a little bit of bleed in terms of all the four corners, but it is somewhat minimal and therefore is perfectly playable if I'm going to be using this monitor for playing dark games or indeed watching dark movies. But of course, if you want a superior experience in this department, you'll want to opt for a TN or a VA panel instead. Now moving on to the monitor's OSD, it can be accessed through a set of physical buttons found at the bottom right of the monitor. I do find these a little bit hard to use, but nevertheless, when you do get onto the OSD menu, it's pretty comprehensive. You've got the input select and the audio adjust, whereby the monitor has two 2-watt speakers. They will suffice for basic notification or music listening, but in my case I would always suggest a set of bookshelf speakers and or a set of headphones. Now in terms of view mode, you will want to probably use it on the standard mode, but you can go through some of the preset modes over here. And as for the color adjust, now I did reference this before, both in terms of brightness and contrast ratio and also in terms of the color temperature. Now I think most will probably want to run on the native or the user color, whereby I've actually reduced one notch of the red and left the blue and the green at 100. But you potentially want to go on the sRGB mode. But as I did reference before, it doesn't do too much when it comes to locking down the overall gamut and or getting better color accuracy. And of course it does limit peak brightness as well, which will not be of definite importance for certain gamers out there. Now as for the manual image adjust, you have got a variety of different settings. Of course, blue light filter will depend on terms of if you want to use it or not. The rest of the settings I have either left them standard or disabled them, such as the advanced DCR. But the most important one over here is actually the response time setting, and I did reference this before in terms of ultra fast, standard and advanced. In my case, I run it on ultra fast, but if your eyes can't take it and or you're playing a bit more graphically intense games, then you might want to run it on its advanced mode due to the inverse ghosting that is done on the highest modes. Now through the setup menu, you do have the AMD option, which also allows you to run NVIDIA G-Sync that I previously referenced, and also the 1 millisecond mode. Just note that when you do enable the 1 millisecond mode, you might notice a bit of strobing on my camera. It doesn't appear like that in real life, but the only thing to note over here is that certain settings will be disabled, such as the response time setting on the manual image adjust menu. Nevertheless, I'm just going to disable it just so that it just doesn't give you a sort of headache while looking at the video. And going further down, you'll be able to see here a power indicator, which you can enable or disable, and that's an LED light which appears towards the bottom right of the monitor. Now its OSD buttons are certainly finicky, but the rest of the overall build quality and the stand of the monitor are certainly impressive. Here you've got a 3-side borderless design, and while the bottom bezel could be a little bit more premium looking, I have no certain inherent issues. Here the 27-inch form factor doesn't take up too much space on terms of my setup. Now you have also got a fully adjustable stand, whereby you've got height, tilt, pivot and rotation available to you. Of course, if you don't want to use the sturdy stand, you can replace it with a VESA compatible stand and therefore place it on a monitor arm or in a multi-monitor setup if you so wish. And so with all of that information that you've hopefully soaked in throughout this review, should you be buying this ViewSonic monitor? Well, quite frankly, I think there's some better alternatives from BenQ, AOC and Acer. They'll be down in the description below, including my full detailed reviews. And indeed here, if you want superior contrast ratio, you should be looking for a VA panel, or if you want the same sort of response time and input lag as this ViewSonic monitor, but don't want to incur the same sort of inverse ghosting in its highest overdrive mode, there's some fantastic IPS panels that you should consider, and furthermore they have better sRGB emulation modes for those people who will be doing some image editing or video grading. Now, if you've enjoyed this detailed independent review, I'll definitely appreciate you dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification if you haven't already. And as such, I've been Totally Dubbed, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.